committee meeting for August 17th. And we have, and did everyone get the agenda? Any issues with the agenda? Then we'll just move forward. And Chris.
One minute back, Nick does have an update for us on the impact fee.
Oh.
He's got an idea he wants to share with everybody.
Okay, so we're going to add that?
Yeah, maybe we should start with that.
Okay, we will do that. We will start with an update from Nick on the impact fee. Okay, Nick?
All right. You guys caught me off guard because I have not thought about this since Friday, but I think I can wing it. We are still a matter of months away from having a McCormick transportation agreement, it seems, and we've been putting off the city's transportation impact fee update because we're waiting for this McCormick agreement to go forward. And I think at this time, I talked to Jennifer Robertson, the attorney who's been negotiating that agreement, and Chris on Friday. And we think we should maybe move forward with a impact fee report that is, there's a section A and a section B of the report. And the section A would be adopting a fee using the methodology that we currently use, where we carve out the McCormick Woods fee that is separate from the city fee. And we would adjust both fees such that they are in the high $4,000 range per peak PM trip, but it would continue to be split between the two funds until we reach an agreement with McCormick. And then the chapter or section B of the report would then take effect once that old 2005 agreement is gone, and the fee wouldn't change. It would just change how we account for that money, and would mean that all of the money then goes into the citywide fund, assuming that we reach an agreement to that effect. But with the development that's going on, I hate waiting any longer and missing out on the revenues that we need to build the city's transportation network. So if the committee likes that idea, we would probably have to spend a little bit more with TSI to get them to write a report of that nature. But I think that's where we're at in that process.
How does that sound to the committee?
I'd like to weigh in for a second.
Please.
I fully support that, Nick, and appreciate the work you're doing on this. My two things that I'd like to do, and no, you may have to weigh in on this. One is I'd like to get the impact fee before and approved by the council before the taking effect before the end of the year. We started talking about this about 3 months ago and saying it would take 3 months, and the year is going to be here and gone very shortly. So that's one thing. Second of all, no, this may have to be where you weigh in. We've talked about with the connection fee about tying it to the CPI. Is there any reason we can't do that also with our infrastructure fees?
Yes, so we're proposing the CCI adjustment for the traffic impact fee as well. Our city attorney is comfortable with that approach, and I believe that will be built into the report.
Awesome. How long do you think it would take to turn around the report so we could get this before the council and approved? Hopefully?
I've got a call with TSI tomorrow to discuss what it would take to do this. I think they could probably put together a report so that we can consider this at the second meeting of September, if everything goes well. It seems like a reasonable timeline to me. And but if something changes, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Nick, what is our current fee?
It varies. So citywide, it's $25.52 per
family residence
per peak PM trip. At McCormick Woods, it's gone slightly higher because the McCormick portion of the fee increase does have an inflationary adjustment in the development agreement. So it's closer to $2,700 per house.
The reason I ask, and now I'm having trouble locating it, but I saw a graph of all of the impact fees statewide last week, and it showed us at $38.52. And is that commercial or?
No, that's a mistake. That was actually even in a document we provided you that showed the comparison, and we pointed out that the number for Port Orchard was incorrect as it was listed in that report. I don't know where that came from, but I think another city compiled that, or it was compiled for another city.
Yeah, I think it was Bellingham.
Yes, I think they just had the wrong amount for us.
Okay, because I went back and looked and I remember anyway, I was a little confused when I saw that. Okay. Scott, how do you feel about that two-section approach to the impact fees, traffic impact fees?
I'm okay with it. I feel like our back's kind of against the wall, and that's what we need to do if we want to get this in part adopted. So I support that as well.
Okay, and Noah, is that going to cause you any heartburn?
No, I think as Jay said, we've been talking about this for several months. So I think it's in the city's best interest to move forward and not continue to delay adopting our tip and our impact fees. You know, McCormick didn't come around to our side, so.
Okay, hearing no dissenting conversation on that, Nick, I would move forward with that with support of the Transportation Committee.
Sounds good. Let's just mention it to the full council tomorrow night in our reports section and make sure there's no major objection. But I think that's within Mark's change order authority on that contract.
Okay, do you want to do that in your reports or do you want me to do it as a Transportation Committee report?
You can do it as part of the Transportation Committee report, and I will, if I need to speak to it, I can as well.
Okay, thank you.
So then, Nick, the plan would be on the second meeting in September, the 22nd? September
Yeah,
20th?
tentatively, depending on how quickly TSI can finalize the report.
Okay. Great.
And do we need to have our deal completed with McCormick ahead of time, or is that which chicken and egg here? Which happens first?
So this is actually, we're gonna update the report. So there's a version 1 of the report and a version 2. Version 1 moves forward as if the McCormick agreement is not repealed. Version 2 would take effect once that old agreement goes away. The fee is going to be the same. It's just that until the old agreement goes away, the money is going to be divided into the McCormick Fund and the City Fund.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more expensive probably to prepare a report like that, but I think we just need to quit stalling on this with regard to waiting for McCormick to come to an agreement, because Jennifer thinks we're out until at least October at the earliest if everything goes right at this time. And I think it's better just to move forward.
I like that approach. I'm sorry that Chief hijacked me just before the meeting started, so I got delayed, missed that part of the conversation.
Well, now we're all in unanimous agreement on it, even the mayor. So we will move forward with that. And we will then go to our TIP, our Transportation Improvement Plan. And Chris, we will turn it over to you.
Okay. So I've been kind of, since I got here, just soaking up all this information. And at some point I started writing it down on sheets of paper so I could keep track of everything. And that's where I came up with this kind of outlines strategic plan thing. Looking with the mind map here, thanks Jackie. So what I'm proposing that we do to address the tip this year for the budget is we start with, hold on a sec, sorry about that. So no, go back, Jackie, if you would. So what I did is I put together this mind map where I think we can wait on the preservation stuff until after the budget is put together, and that can live at a programmatic level. And then how we would address the improvement things, I thought we could start with the stuff that's driven by our level of service for the arterial corridors first, and that would be today. And then our next meeting, we can look at the more of the local center and neighborhood streets. So that's kind of what I'm proposing how we approach this. And I think everybody from our preliminary discussions by email, that I think I got agreement with that. So let's go on to the next slide.
That's an engineering drawing, I take it. It's very complex. It's straight lines.
Can I just ask a question real quick? And maybe this is, I don't know if it's a Chris or a Mark question, but how do we put our RTIP through PSRC or direct with the state?
I believe we send our 6-year tip to PSRC every year, right, Mark?
Okay. Okay, just wanted, so that's the one that goes to them is we send it, our 6-year tip to PSRC.
And then it goes on their state transportation improvement here. And that's
Right.
what led to that whole conflab 5-6 years ago when PSRC first asked for it and they realized that everybody was doing it differently.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Okay, so back to the map here. So what this is just a refresher from our comprehensive plan, the transportation chapter. It shows the projects that are needed to address level of service up here through 2036, and now with our update from 2019 for the TIF that we did, it's basically through 2040 and the same information. One important thing to note is you'll see, all these dots, those are intersection improvements. Also, we have corridor or segment level of service issues with Bethel and Old Clifton. With Old Clifton, the recommended improvements would be non-motorized improvements, and then hopefully you're familiar with the Bethel study. It outlines the improvements that are needed for that. So the segment level service isn't showing up on the map, so that's why I brought that up. And then if you look at all the dots on the map, it's important to note that some of those are state projects. About half of them are state projects. And I've kind of put that in pencil. I've circled these little areas on the map that show a number of them are state projects. So this is the starting point for the arterial corridors discussion. I think there any questions on that information? If not, I think we can just go ahead and move on to the map and begin looking at Old Clifton.
Chris, is there a particular order you're going to go through these from perhaps least favorite to most favorite, or is this just in random?
I kind of set it up where I thought the most intense discussion, I'd start with those items first, and then I put Bethel last because we had the study, so I think that's a little clearer as to what our direction is on that. Just in case.
Okay, thank you.
And currently we have 5 grant applications. And when we go to the budget process, whatever we get, we're a bit nebulous in right now. No one are trying to find $1 million to plug in for transportation needs and streets. And whether we're successful in grants will drive where those dollars get plugged into. So we'll be bringing back, maybe we'll have some tough decisions and reject a grant, or maybe we won't have any grants awarded. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, Mayor, just a curiosity question. Is there any legality issues, that some intersections, if we don't, would put the city at risk? We've got a pretty good plan, have an idea of where we want to work, but would any of the intersections drive changes to that?
I don't know, we've got a mandate to do sidewalk improvements and ramps, and that's primarily downtown. We've been while we haven't conquered the existing problems, we've added numerous new sidewalks and ramps far exceeding the what we had in our plan, and that's what we've been very purposefully documenting because what will get sued is if we there's law firms out there that look for you, that you're implementing your plan. So we're making sure that we're documenting the improvements that we're making to our sidewalks and sidewalk ramps.
Okay, I was just concerned, as we, I know when Nick has, pointed out several times that we have intersections and they're rated, A to F. I didn't know if, one of them turned into an F, would that put us at greater risk, or it's just a congestion issue?
There's always risk in life. I think that we've got 100% design on this McCormick Woods Anderson Hill intersection that's on this map. We've got some mitigation dollars that have a clock on them. That's why we continue to pursue that is one of our grant opportunities. And Chris tells me it doesn't score well. At some point, we might have our back against the wall as far as making sure we spend those, we elevating some of our dollars so that we don't lose the impact dollars. That'd be my only concern.
Thank you.
And Chris, I guess that's a good question. I hope I'm not jumping ahead here because I want to get you back on track to where you were. But when Jay asked about the level of service, and we have that scorecard from A to F, I'm taking that mean that F's a failing level of service in that intersection. Is it just about congestion, or what else does the failing level of service mean?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but with the Growth Management Act, we're required to plan for it and make that a priority. But whether we can actually deliver on all those things or not, I don't know that there's any way that we're held accountable by the state.
No, I think that it's purely a time delay for vehicles issue, combined with if there aren't pedestrian facilities, it could fail the concurrency test for pedestrian improvements. But we get to choose what our level of service is, and if we wanted to lower it, we could. So it doesn't have to be a level of service D. We're choosing that is our standard.
It's the county's at F throughout the county. It's level service it's more of a comfort test as to a safety test. So we're not driven by LOS as prioritizing projects.
And just to add to that, I don't know that, changing from E to F is going to change anything, because pretty much everything, I think there's only one of the intersection improvements that doesn't fail by 2040 as an F versus an E. Doesn't meet our level of service requirements. So they'll all be failed at some point if we don't start, which is, I think, why we need to demonstrate to the community that we're doing projects over time.
But I think it's also important to note that the simple fact that the city has evolved into actually having transportation impact fees, and the transportation studies allow us to determine whether or not an intersection is already failing or will be failing as a result of the development, whereby that development is required to do improvements. And for decades, that had never really happened.
So that's a good segue to move into our map here and talk about the different intersection improvements that are identified. You can see there are 4 locations for roundabouts. So Anderson Hill is the one that's first in our CIP, and the first one that shows a level of service failure according to our traffic planning. And the other one that's going to be built next year is the one at Campus Parkway, which is unfortunately the roads aren't labeled, but it's the one further west from McCormick Woods. So that's a developer one. Their impact of building a new community in that location is triggering the level of service failure and the need for the intersection. The other one that's going to fail by 2025, I believe, according to our traffic study, is the McCormick Woods Drive roundabout. That's one where we may want to think about, just with what the community desires are. Maybe that's one that can wait a little bit longer. And also, I don't know, Nick, you've had some discussions with the developers too about what some of the credits they're going to get with the transportation impact fees, and maybe they build that before the city does. But that's more in the intermediate time frame than the short-term time frame. And then the other one that's shown there is just a future one when if the school ever gets built out at Fegley, then someday, or if there's a lot more development out that way, then that may be a concurrency situation on that 4th intersection.
And speaking of potential liabilities, the one risk that I think we've identified in this corridor is the creek to the west of McCormick Woods Drive is in a culvert that is potentially a barrier, or I think it is identified as a barrier. And so We think that we're far enough east where we wouldn't have to do that culvert, but that is a pretty deep culvert, and there's a huge, what is it, a crib wall that's supporting the roadway there. And so if for some reason that project triggered a hydraulic permit approval, you know, there's a possibility that that McCormick Woods Drive intersection morphs into something much more complex and expensive. And so there's potentially some upside to doing it sooner rather than later if regulations or requirements were to change, you know, or I suppose there's also the risk that if we do it too soon, we're going to rip out improvements. And so you have to evaluate the risk of moving forward with that one on a shorter or longer term basis based on whether you potentially don't have to replace that culvert at this time, or whether replacing the culvert later is going to require you to rip out the new roundabout that you've built.
FYI too, not to butt in, but just to let you know so that everybody gets it on their radar, that right there is one of our stream augmentation sites required by our current water rights.
Is that Anderson Creek?
I think that one is.
I think it's a tributary to Anderson Creek. I think Anderson Creek goes through the park, and this one joins Anderson Creek a little bit further north.
Yeah. What I want to say about Oak Clifton as we're doing this planning, and John alluded to it at our last council meeting, in that I think because of the residential development within the city along Old Clifton, I think it's important that we keep that in the realm of a city street and not a freight corridor. With the Amazon building development going out at the port, it would be real easy to use that as an access to Highway 16. And I really would like to see that remain as a residential street and not a freight corridor. The freight corridor can move down to Lake Flora.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be a residential street, it'd probably be an arterial street, but
Right,
still,
but
but
it
not.
has that-
Yeah.
But not a freight corridor.
Yeah, and I'm going to propose that if we aren't successful in that Anderson Hill grant, and we are successful getting the money from the county, that between McCormick Woods Drive and Anderson Hill, we've got a design that we need to do for the multimodal pathway, and that we spend those dollars right away that we get from the county, and have a plan, and so that we start competing for grants for that, because I think that's a bigger priority possibly than some of the other improvements out there.
I would like to see that plan go all the way down to our park or campus, the roundabout at Campus Parkway.
The developer takes care of McCormick. If we're successful in our development agreement with the developer, they take care of from McCormick Woods Drive even out. I think, how far out do they go, Nick? It's quite a ways. It's to the park for sure.
Yeah, at least to the park entrance, and we'd like to connect to Campus Parkway, but the road is very constrained across Anderson Creek. We think there's enough room with a retaining wall to potentially get the multimodal pathway in there, but there's also some overhead power lines that potentially interfere with realigning the roadway to use the south shoulder. So it's really just a design problem that needs to be worked out. I think we can get there.
Okay, I just know that there's a lot of foot traffic to that park.
Yep, we're aware of.
So in accordance with our traffic planning and our comprehensive planning, the other aspect of this is the segment level of service. And what's being proposed is the non-motorized improvements. And what you see here, this is what I'm recommending here on this map, is that we would provide shoulders that are shown in the green color on both sides from Fegley all the way to Anderson Hill, and then tie into future county improvements, and then provide a multi-use pathway that links all the trail systems in the neighborhoods, which are shown in yellow.
That pathway is only on one side, correct, and not on both sides.
Right, it would just be on the north side, correct.
There's a pathway on one side.
And this deviates a little bit from, it's a little fuzzy as to what these non-motorized improvements are, as they are in the comp plan. But what is called for is a multi-use pathway from the McCormick Woods developments all the way to Tremont. And I don't personally, I'm not seeing that, most people that are going to travel that kind of distance, I think they'll either be fit riders that are willing to be on traffic or on e-bikes. I mean, you may have some people that walk, but not as many. But I think most of the users would be served by just concentrating the trail system to link up all these wonderful recreational trails that are out there in these developments. So that's what I'm proposing the priority would be for us in the near term.
The trails that are shown in yellow, are the preponderance of those paved or unpaved?
They're unpaved, so they're like 6-foot wood chip surface trails. Some of them are gravel surface, like the one around the park area.
Okay.
The water park. So how does that resonate with everyone trying to, really reduce the scope of that as far as our short-term goals for the corridor?
I like it. I think that's important. Having ridden my bike that section, doing a big loop and coming down through that section, it's not very comfortable as a bike rider. So I can see the need for those improvements.
We have to remember too, though, we don't control the width of the shoulder in the county. We can only make our improvements. It's not to say that we can't require mitigation, some future development, in the county, but we don't control all of it.
Right. The county does a lot of wide lanes and 12-foot lanes and 4-foot shoulders, I think.
The one thing I was going to point out is that the Bayside plat, which is who paid this mitigation money to the city, which is just north of the ridge along Anderson Hill, our shoulder stops at the entrance to the ridge and does not continue to tie into those Bremerton areas to the north. I know the grades out there would be really difficult for doing any kind of improvements because the road drops off pretty steeply on both sides. But that's one potential gap in connecting these areas of Bremerton to the areas of the city.
Yeah. True. Bremerton's got to make it part of one of their priorities. I mean, we shouldn't be funding improvements in Bremerton.
All right. Well, so just to wrap up, so the way I've got the strategic outline here put together is the short-term priorities are the construction of the Anderson Hill roundabout, the design of the non-motorized improvements, the study, and we'd include a study of the McCormick Wood intersection in that if that doesn't get done by the developers, just to make sure we're tying everything together. And then development review and oversight of developer transportation improvement projects, largely around the Campus Parkway intersection. And our recommended next steps are to submit for TIB funding for the Anderson Hill roundabout, which we just did last week, to do a 60% design for Clifton and a 30% design for the McCormick Woods Drive intersection, which is something I believe is being put into the transportation improvement plan. There's proposed for that. And then update the budget, the CIP and the budget with better numbers once that study is completed. And then advocate for state improvements to State Route 16 Tremont off-ramp intersections to preserve the, to keep this corridor functioning as it ties to Highway 16 in Tremont. So if that sounds good, we'll go on to the next one.
I have to apologize. I have to bug out for another meeting, so I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay, thanks for stopping by.
Bye.
Okay, Chris, move to the next.
So next up is the Sedgwick and Sydney Road area. And we've been having some discussions about what's the best approach here. Long term, there's nothing that shows up in our transportation study, but the city did some designs on Sedgwick to the west of State Route 16. We're thinking someday that might end up being 2 lanes in each direction, 4-lane roadway through there. The state's planning longer term intersection improvements at the off ramps there. We don't have anything as far as where Sydney meets Sedgwick, that intersection signalized, and we don't have any failures predicted for within our planning period for that. Mark, you've expressed some concerns about the congestion here, especially at the Lowe's signal intersection and how it relates to the state's.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. And with McCormick Woods Drive, a lot of the traffic that was perhaps planned to go down Old Clifton is coming over this way to Sedgwick. So even though it doesn't show up in our studies, that's something we're concerned about going in the intermediate term. Sorry to cut you off, Mark. I don't know if you wanted to.
No, I think Beck knows, I think most people know that this is the number one probably community input into City Hall complaint. I've received more complaints about this section from Sydney to Highway 16 than pretty much any other part in this city. So I've just continued to ask people to contact their local legislative representatives because this is a state issue. So.
Well, it's a state issue at 16. It's a city issue for the segment between Sydney and 16.
Well, the problem is that it's the failure of the intersection that's causing the problems, and we're exacerbating it because we're approving projects that continue to add to something that's already failed. So it's not a good situation. I mean, there isn't a quick, easy fix for this, and it's not happening anytime soon.
The other thing to recognize, this is going to be a very challenging roadway to address in the future due to the topography and the proximity to a creek and wetlands. So we are thinking that we need to start planning for those kinds of things for the eventuality of needing to widen that roadway.
Do we know when they're going to fix the culvert and where the culvert fix happens on that section?
That's a WashDOT project that they're currently designing. I believe it was funded for the next year and a half for design, but that's under the on and off ramp to the north along 16. It's pretty far away from this intersection.
Is it really? I thought it was right down there.
No,
they just added $16 million to their tip at PSRC for that project.
Right.
Talking about the Sedgwick interchange? And that culvert?
No, that's the Blackjack Creek culvert, and we had previously asked them to look at their traffic operations issues at the same time they're doing the culvert work, and they said they weren't going to do that, I guess they're separate departments and separate projects, separate pots of money. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but that was the answer that we got about a year and a half ago.
Okay, and that's going in on the east side of 16, the culvert.
It's going all the way under 16. So Blackjack Creek, I think, Jackie, you've got your mouse where the culvert is, roughly.
Yeah. And then the interchange is affected too on the east side. You're correct, Beck.
Yes, it's right. You can see where Blackjack Creek comes right through right here.
I think it's actually a little bit further south because it does go under both of the off ramps, but it's so it's actually 3 separate culverts right now that are getting replaced, one under each off ramp and then one under the 4 lanes of SR16.
Yeah, right. I just agree with what you said earlier, Nick, is it makes sense to me that if the state is going to do this work, that those roundabouts should be done at the same time.
Yeah, we've been making that argument for a while.
Who are we making it to?
Well, with our lobbyist to WashDOT. You and I went down to Olympia and chatted with them at one point.
Yeah, right. Anyway, I know that it's moving forward. I know, like I said, that they added $16 million to their tip at PSRC for the project.
Right. So I think we've addressed the Sedgwick issue. And connection between Sydney and State Route 16. The other issue we have in this area is the Sydney Road Southwest. There's a number of developments that are proposed in there that'll do a lot of frontage improvements along the street. And we want to make sure that that gets shaped in accordance with the comprehensive plan. From what I'm seeing, Nick, it looked like some kind of preliminary layout work was done for the street, but there's a little bit more to do in regard to the transmission main and how that may shape the development along the frontage and the right-of-way, additional right-of-ways needed and maybe perhaps unbalanced, favoring one side and the other due to the transmission mains to be able to achieve the street that the city's planned. So I think what makes sense to me is to do in the short term is to look at updating the city's master planning, perhaps developing a cross section based on the right-of-way needs in a couple locations and try to get ahead of the development.
So you said that's for Sydney Avenue or Sydney Road Southwest, right?
Correct.
So that's already in the Ruby Creek plan. We've got the section drawings in there, combined with the drawing that was done for the Ruby Creek culvert replacement. So that the section drawings are already in place.
But do they fully recognize the power transmission and the need to offset the roadway a little bit from the center line?
No, they don't recognize the overhead transmission and whether that gets undergrounded.
Yeah. So it's good to hear that a lot of the work's been done though. So perhaps an update to that, and then that'll help shape the development.
What development are we forecasting that, or have people approached us about in that area with frontage improvements?
So it's the Ruby Creek plan is on our website. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the draft plan yet. It's still at the Planning Commission, but I expect it to hopefully get voted out on the 1st of September and then come to the council. But we've got about I think it's about 780 units of housing in that neighborhood, which is with the existing housing brings the total population of the area to about 1,800. So it's the Ruby Creek Apartments, which we believe are coming in any day now for their land disturbing activity permit to start building the roads and driveways. And then there's the Rush development, which just came in for permits last week at Sydney and Sedgwick. And then with the park and ride that Kitsap Transit's talking about, there's a little bit more of a question on what happens south of Ruby Creek. It's either going to be a commercial mixed use kind of downtown storefront street with apartments behind it, or with a park and ride behind it on the Blackjack Creek floodplain.
All right, thank you.
So any further questions about Sydney or Sedgwick?
No, I'm good. Are you good? Where's Jay?
Right here with the thumb up.
Okay.
So just to recap, the short-term priorities are the city street master planning development. It's mostly been completed, but perhaps an update there if needed. And the Ruby Creek culvert replacement and project. The city has applied for RCO grant funding to try to provide a fish passage culvert at that location.
Okay.
Recommended next steps are submit the RCO grant, which we did. Staff to update the master planning, which we talked about. Next major developer to acquire the site for new sewer. Oh, also the sewer lift station's an issue, and we want to make sure we address the or the sewer goes in the street and provide for improvements, capacity improvements to the lift station. So I added that to to the recommended next steps. And then advocate for state improvements to State Route 16, 160 off-ramp intersections, which they've identified in their corridor study they completed in 2018 as a longer-term priority for them. Okay, well, on to the next one, which is Pottery, going north. So what you're looking at here is our traffic studies indicate that we'll have a level of service failure at Lippert, and so we will need some intersection improvements there. Following the Tremont project, we've got a section of sidewalk there's a gap that needs to be addressed near Tremont. And then I've come up with this idea where I think this is kind of opportunity driven, but we have a school that's located on Pottery. And I think there's an opportunity, and our traffic study shows that we really only need one lane if we have the right intersection improvements. So I think there's an opportunity there to do a road diet project to improve the safety of that corridor. We've got, the kids going to school. We've got a lot of dense housing and senior housing in the area.
And I know you're from Bainbridge Island. It's Lippert.
Oh, sorry. Not Lippert.
There's also one sidewalk gap on there that you're missing, which is just north of Lippert on the west side. There's about 300 or 400 feet of sidewalk gap in front of that business park property.
Okay. So I should add that to the sidewalk gap project idea.
Right. And then I guess depending on what an ultimate project looks like, the sidewalks that are there are somewhat substandard. And so we should decide, and we should probably include in our plans, if we're not going to plan on putting in landscape strips and street trees, we should probably say so in our plan for that corridor.
Yeah, that's just practical because of the topography and the amount of stuff that's already built out.
Right.
So, yeah, and so I'm also thinking that we want to have a bike lane on both sides. So that would, to complete the corridor from Tremont down to Lippert.
Mm-hmm. You got it.
Yeah.
Would require actually reconstructing some of the sidewalks, not a lot of it, but some of it.
The
Okay.
substandard sidewalks, is that the asphalt that you're talking about, Nick?
No, it's just it's a 5 foot rather than a 6 foot. It's a monolithic curb rather than a separate concrete curb, and there's no landscape strip between the curb and the travel lanes.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so intermediate to longer term, it'd be great to be able to have the full non-motorized facilities all through the corridor. And if we did the sidewalk gap project separately, we would provide for that future bike lane.
And the sidewalk gap project, also a water project and a storm project.
Mhm.
Yep.
I also, there's a center turn lane the length of Pottery. I wonder if there's also some opportunity to put some center landscape islands in there just for beautification in that corridor as well, where in areas where turn lanes aren't needed.
That's a good point. So I want to, the whole idea of this road diet project is something I'm just throwing into the mix. It's based on the idea that I think I can get some safe routes to school funding for the school because of the school there. And so what we do is we take the 4 lanes, reduce it down to 2 lanes, and then provide bike lanes, and then put in the separated sidewalks that Nick had just talked about that we may not be able to do on the north section of the street there.
Yeah, I think I'm just a little confused. Maybe I'm not reading this correctly. There's where you have that, it says non-motorized improvement road diet.
Yes?
And are you taking that down to where?
To the freeway.
So where we go under here,
Actually, we would take it farther than that. We would take it all the way to Berry Lake.
Yeah,
Right, but that's 2 lanes right now.
it's so
Quite a
back
bit of shoulder there.
when,
Yeah, there's a lot of shoulder, but it's 2 lanes.
Yeah, where it transitions near the freeway, we've already got 2 lanes and bike lanes in that location. So it's really just having continuous bike lanes through the corridor would be the extent of the project.
Okay.
I think what we're really trying to say is we're going to clean up a very bastardized area that was, those improvements were required as part of the Cedar Heights Junior High construction when it was anticipated to be more than what it is. And so we corrected the Berry Lake with the right turn only lane. That helped a lot. and then made that an all-way stop, and turning Lippert Pottery into an all-way stop has helped. But there's still a lot of confusion with that left turn northbound over to Pottery Heights, where the left lane ends, and it's just very bastardized. And I think really we're calling it a road diet, but we're gonna standardize the channelization through there by providing pedestrian improvements.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and we've had some issues with the Lippert intersection there as well from a safety standpoint. So that, I mean, the whole thing is kind of a safety enhancement project,
Right.
and a capacity project.
And just, I can just weigh in from previous experience. That would be awesome in front of the whole school area and the apartments, making that more pedestrian friendly. Those 4 lanes and how fast people go on there is crazy.
Chris, I'm on Street View right now, and I noticed that when they did this project, they put the power transmission in the center islands, and I don't know that they meet the clear zone standards there either. So there's probably a power lines that are needing to be moved there because they don't meet standards.
Yeah, or we could potentially add guardrails in the center island.
Right.
But yeah, that'll have to be accounted for somehow.
Before, I'm going to go on just a little side tangent, but before we move away from this discussion, South Kitsap Boulevard had substantive curb damage during, I think, the Tremont diversion traffic. That hasn't been repaired, and it's in need of at least some cleanup until it gets repaired. It's looking pretty bad.
That's on our to-do list. It's just a manpower issue. We're going to go through and completely clean up the landscaping, and then re-pour that extruded curbing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, when I just go down and we'll wrap this up. So the short-term priorities that I have on the outline are the study that confirmed that this would be one that the staff would do to confirm the road diet approach, taking into account the aspects like Nick had brought up and others, just to make sure that it's feasible and come up with the costs and see how that fits with the funding source. Recommend next steps are due to that staff to develop corridor sketch, cross sections estimate. And we get the traffic consultant to verify that it meets the future level of service requirements. And we'd likely have a mini roundabout at Lippert. And our traffic study shows that Kitsap may need improvements, but they're not recommended in the current terms. So we take another look at that. We'd subsequently update the CIP and the budget, and then we work with school leadership to develop, if it looks feasible, to develop a safe routes to school grant application.
Hey Chris, this is Noah. Can I ask a question on the road diet? When that 4-lane road was originally constructed, was that federal money that was used to pay for that? And are there any strings or anything that would prevent us from changing how that road is currently being used?
No, that's that was a mitigation requirement for the junior high back when they thought, if you look at the best way to keep it simple is look at Port Orchard Boulevard and then Boulevard from Bay Street to Tremont, then look at Pottery from Lippert to the south. And what you're going to see is that there was an intention at some point by the city that Port Orchard Boulevard / Pottery was going to be a main north-south corridor through the city, because Bethel was in the county at the time. And so they had built Port Orchard Boulevard in the late 60s, early 70s to this road standard. They got it up to Tremont. When Cedar Heights was built about that time, they made them build that road section. Then things started to change, and between Tremont and Lippert, that whole corridor is nothing but a massive wetland. The city even has sewer lines that are submerged through there. And so the city had to abandon this desire to have this major north-south connector road going up Port Orchard Boulevard. So it's a completely out of place road section.
Back in the 70s is when Highway 16 got widened, and that's when Tremont became an interchange. Prior to that, I don't even know that it was a crossroad. The access points to the freeway were at different places. So
It was a crossroad. It's just one of those dangerous.
yeah. So when all those there was half a dozen crossroads removed through in the Port Orchard area, and then you ended up with just the 2 interchanges, and that was in the early 70s that happened.
And then by the mid 80s, the word wetland started becoming a real thing as opposed to a peat bog that you just filled. So things just changed in this. We're going to have to address, we already addressed with sewer to some degree, the amount of sewer that runs through that wetland by the new force main and the Cedar Heights pump station. But at some point we may have to eliminate that gravity sewer through there in its entirety. So it's just out there melting right now.
Engineering term, melting.
Well, it's something I'm talking
All right.
So we have 2 more corridors to talk about, Tremont and Bethel. We're down to 5 minutes. I don't know if people want to continue and go long, or whether we want to wrap this up and continue at our next meeting.
I'm good to about 10:45.
I'm good till about then as well.
Okay, then let's see if we can wrap it up by in the next 20 minutes.
Okay, so if you take a one step back, oh wait, where's the Tremont map, Jackie? Did I not send you one? Guess not. All right, well, so hopefully you can refer to your handouts. Basically, what we're just talking about is the extension of the Tremont project down to Sydney. And so in our traffic studies, we've identified that a intersection improvement will be needed at Sydney and Tremont, and we want to then, of course, extend the improvements down to the intersection when we do that project.
Is this the map you were looking for, Chris?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I say roundabout because we, in theory, down the line, it'd be great from a maintenance standpoint if we didn't have anything, if we didn't have signals to maintain. It's just something that's a complexity for the city to deal with. Currently, I think we sub out the work to the county, but I could envision someday we just have roundabouts and no signals. So hopefully this one's pretty straightforward. I don't know that there's a lot to discuss. So I just have the short-term priority is study to better plan for the costs and implementation. Recommended next step, staff to develop a corridor sketch, cross-section, and estimate, just so as we go forward, we have better information for the CIP, and then we would update the CIP and the budget accordingly. So this is more of a intermediate to long-term improvement.
I'm wondering whether the roundabout and the widening and pedestrian improvement should be separated, just based on the timing of when the failure occurs at Sydney and Tremont. I think there's an immediate gap right now in that area for pedestrian connectivity, but I'm pretty sure that the level of service there, I don't know when that failure was anticipated to occur, but I think it's still pretty far away, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not on the 2025 baseline, so it's out further.
Probably a good call, Nick.
Yeah, because I am one of those people that walk up there. And when I walk up Sydney, I'm more comfortable going to that intersection and continuing south on Sydney and making the right on Lippert down rather than walking Tremont.
Yeah, that's a holdover because in 1992 the city did the Bethel or the Tremont widening project, and for some reason they only went up to Port Orchard Boulevard instead of going to Sydney. I think they had concerns with property acquisitions on the north side, and they chose to reduce their project. And
Right, but
unfortunately,
Right. What I'm saying is I agree with Nick. I think separating those two might be advantageous for us.
yeah, I think we're gonna have to.
All right, well, I'll change the phasing to have an intermediate project for the non-motorized and a long-term project for the intersection improvement. Okay, if nothing more, I think we can head on to Bethel. So this one, we did the study in not that long ago in what was it, 18? So you can see the phasing there. I think it's been pretty well thought out. Now, when I looked at the build grant, I kind of combined everything because we could have to go after more money at once. So I kind of combined portions of 4 and including Bel Air, Salmonberry, and then portions of 3. I guess 1 is actually Salmonberry to Blueberry, but really the sidewalk improvements would head all the way down to Sedgwick with that. So that's what that red circle represents, is kind of what the build grant submitted was. And then the other thing we've looked at with our city safety program funding is to the number 1 accident intersection we have is or the other red circle is, and what's the name of the road that goes off of there?
Lundberg and Mitchell.
Yeah, at that location.
Lundberg.
So we have a number of grant opportunities. This is probably our most grant fundable project. Just a lot of things going from it from a mobility and a safety standpoint.
Do we have a timeline as to when we may hear back from the build grant or any of the grants you have out?
November, I believe. Late in the budget process, unfortunately.
So, yeah, I thought Bethel would be pretty straightforward. Let me find my list of what I have for the phasing. So, refer to the Bethel Sedgwick Corridor Plan phases 1 to 5 for phasing. Priority is phase 1, Bethel from Sedgwick to south of Lund. Exception above the above I have is Bethel Lincoln intersection that I talked about just because of the safety aspect of that. Short-term priority would be phase 1. And then we also added in there realign Bel Air Court because that's something we're interested in doing if there's an opportunity to work with the developers on that. And then safety enhancements to Bethel Lincoln intersection, and then WashDOT Sedgwick road widening. They have that as a short-term priority in their State Route 16 study that they completed in 2018. Recommended next steps is 60% design for phase 1, which I believe is being proposed in the budget. Begin NEPA permitting and right-of-way acquisition because that's a longer-term thing that we need to address. That's going to take a number of years to deliver the project due to those complexities. And then submit for grant funding for build, city safety, TIB, urban arterials program, which we've done. Advocate for state improvements to State Route 16 160 off-ramps. Advocate for state corridor improvements and then use city TIF funding if there are certain intersections in addition to the widening that we want to encourage them to accommodate at the time that they do the widening for the street for Sedgwick. So any need for further discussion?
No, I have a question for the mayor. We had a conversation a while ago that you were wanting the transportation committee to kind of prioritize projects moving into the budget cycle. Are you still wanting us to do that?
Well, that was prior to Chris us submitting 5 grant applications. What I concluded thereafter was a grant award is going to drive this, and then we'll come back and have discussion about, well, here's where we had success or we didn't. If we're not successful, then I think we would be looking for concurrence how we spend those dollars. You know, I think Chris is alluding to the engineering department is going to advocate for advancing designs on Bethel with our impact fee dollars, and then we're going to have some conversations about preservation and maintenance. And I think there's some needs for some grind outs and overlays probably on Old Clifton to get us farther down the road, and also on the Sydney South area. We've also got a significant, I think the county will fund our Lippert improvements, but because they're only going to fund sidewalks, we'll have a considerable amount of you know, it's about $600,000, isn't it, Noah? Would be our match for that corridor fix on Lippert, to rebuild that road and to do the sidewalks and the ramps. So I think we'll have, I think, a more robust discussion when we get news on our grant awards.
So what I'm hoping for is the end of today's discussion that everybody's on board with the short-term recommendations and the outline that I put together. And that pretty much sets our direction. And it's in keeping with what we already have in the tip currently.
Okay,
A little more refinement on that.
yeah, I would like some input from Scott and Jay.
Actually, I'm very happy with what we reviewed today. One question for a little bit later, but I feel like we're making progress on where we're headed, and I appreciate the work you've done, Chris.
I concur with that as well.
Okay, Chris, I'm not hearing a lot of robust discussion, so I believe that we're all very pleased with the work you've presented. You've outlined it in a way that we can understand it. And I believe we're all in agreement of the work that needs to be done. So it's going to be timing and resources at this point. I also appreciated the other handout you gave us, and that was the funding schedule you had, or opportunities for funding, where you might be looking for sources of revenue to complete some of these.
Yeah, and this is something that, you know, I think I'm trying to partner with Noah on to try to, you know, if we are successful in all these things, what can we reasonably expect to do within 6 years, and how many grant opportunities do we have?
Right.
And then, so yeah, I did break it down for each of the corridor projects here, and looked at, you know, the bottom part of this is the different grant programs that are out there, and when the call for applications are, and then the upper part is how we break it out into which ones would be targeted for the different projects, which ones seem to meet the criteria well. What I'm kind of big picture sense, what I'm finding out is, I think, again, the Sedgwick and Bethel, those are probably good for just about any funding source. They're very competitive. Old Clifton, you know, we'll see how we do with the urban arterials program, but we didn't really meet their development criteria very well, because they're after commercial development, not residential development. And we don't have, from a mobility standpoint, you know, we're planning for future failures. We don't have current failures, and we don't have the safety issues that we have with the Bethel corridor. So in my way of thinking, I think what we should do is we should focus, if we're not successful this time around, we should focus on the surface transportation program. You have more of a peanut butter effect going on with KRCC. And we could focus those dollars on Old Clifton, and then we'd soak up most of the dollars that we would see through the surface transportation program for that corridor in the next 6 years. And then focus, you know, with all the other, the BUILD program, the urban arterials program, the complete streets program on Bethel, any of the state and other federal programs that we could suck up. And that leaves kind of a sprinkling of things going on with for Sydney and Tremont and Pottery, you know, the Safe Routes to School program, the sidewalk program through TIB, to hope to get some help with those projects.
I think another thing we want to think about is, if at some point the legislature puts together another funding package, we're going to need to be prepared with what projects we want to put forth in that. The other thing I'm going to say is at a conversation last week, Secretary Millar was doing a question and answer. And one of the things he alluded to somewhat casually, but those of us that it applied to, ears perked up, is that the state, an option for them is to defer future maintenance on the state highways that are used like main streets through towns. It was definitely, he was talking about the spurs like we have on 166. So I think we need to be grateful that they've done the sidewalk improvements, the ADA, and then they've redone our signals, and they're looking at that roundabout there at Bay Street and Beach Drive. So anyway, I think we're real lucky that those things are moving forward right now.
Yeah, I agree, Beck. The spur roads have been a problem with the state for, when Christine Gregoire was governor, she was trying to get rid of all spur roads because of it's a headache for WashDOT. And we fought to keep 166 on WashDOT's books, but my sense is that over time, that's going to be pretty low hanging fruit for WashDOT.
Correct. And he made that clear.
To take 2734 and go backwards with it. Instead of increasing the population, they're going to decrease the population level.
Yeah, that could be too.
So one question for next time is, if we are successful in doing, getting a lot of these things funded, are we going to have any transportation impact fee or other money left over to do neighborhood streets and centers and any of these other projects that are out there in the CIP? And I kind of, my feeling on this is going to suck up by the time we do some pavement preservation and some sidewalks, this is going to suck up the majority of the money the city's going to have if we're successful with these grants, just funding the match.
Right. The other thing that the Peninsula RPTO is doing is our mantra is the jurisdictions need sustainable, reliable funding sources. This competitive process that we go through now, makes it difficult. But to do our preservation particularly, we need reliable, sustainable funding source. And I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be, but when the voters eliminated the car tabs for us, that took an element away from us. So we're discussing that both at KRCC and at the Peninsula RPTO, just so you guys are aware of the interest that has garnered.
And I've started doing kind of a white paper for both the sidewalks and the pavement preservation. We don't have to talk about that much now, but anyway,
Right.
That's of course going forward on that too.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else for our meeting today? We're running up to that 10:45.
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Okay.
With the roundabout going in from the state down at KFC, I believe they're looking at that in 2020.
Wish Sandwich. They don't have any funding.
Okay, that's what my question was, because I didn't know if there was any impact to the city. Thank you.
Someday, but there's no funding.
I'm good.
Just a second. The state's DOT's most recent Kitsap projects are 6 fish barriers, Highway 166 Bethel Bay Maple Roundabout, Highway 166 Port Orchard rebuilt signs. They're doing something at Austin Drive, Highway 3 Austin Drive, Sherman Hill northbound, 305 construction, and 307, 305 ADA compliance. That's what the state's working on in the county.
Well, we also just sent an email out during the course of this meeting. The state's barrier-free group is now addressing the design of our box culvert at Bay Street. So
Oh,
if what happened to City of Bremerton holds, and I'm confirming with Ned Lever, and given the issues at that culvert, that might end up being a bridge and a complete rebuild of the DeKalb Pier Head and some major utility issues. So we'll have to track that and get out in front of that.
okay. Anything else? With that,
Anything new for the agenda next time? I guess people could follow up by email if they have anything we want to add to the agenda.
right, and we're going to go over the preservation projects, correct?
I think next time I was gonna
Oh, the centers.
centers, yeah, in the local streets.
Okay.
And
Chris,
then
thank you for the mind map. It was interesting to see the connectivity between all the different projects.
The other thing, Nick, the report you gave at economic development, with where all the development is going in, are you doing that for land use or any of the other committees?
I could certainly do that if you would like. I'm actually giving a similar presentation to a couple of realtor groups this week. So I've been refining it, and which would you prefer?
Well, I don't know. I just think everyone should see it. I thought it was very informative. So if you want to bring it back to this group, that's fine. I'm assuming land use. If you did it to land use and finance, well, utilities, I don't know. I just think either do it at a council meeting, at a work study, or do it at, our individual committee meetings.
Let's, Chris, go ahead and put it on for the next transportation committee meeting, and I'll also take it to land use.
Okay, now what was it again?
Projected growth.
Projected growth, okay. Excellent.
Okay, and with that, we will adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.